Hello, friends. As we launch digital Dharma, how to use AI for elevating spiritual intelligence and personal well-being, I just want to share with you that right now we also have what we call the digital Deepak.ai to go along with that. So digitaldeepak.ai has already premiered. We launched it in Cannes a few days ago. And basically, it will be monitoring everything that I'm saying in digital Dharma. And you don't need to download an app. You don't need to do anything. Just go on your browser and start asking any questions, and then if you find the questions confusing, ask more questions, and digital Deepak.ai will answer your questions. So every day that I post these videos, they will also be fed into digital Deepak.ai, and then that'll give you food for thought, and you can ask more queries. And then together we can explore everything: reality, consciousness, health, well being, spirituality, non dual traditions, and philosophy, and even theology. As I've written books on Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, also track the history of God through the beginning, from in the biblical sense in the Old Testament, and then move on to Christian saints and Islamic Sufis and Tagore and Einstein, and all of that will be there. So you can ask any question that has to do with well-being and spirituality or theology or philosophy or science as it pertains to health, longevity, health span, and all that. Okay, so today I want to share with you the role of perception and cognition in shaping our everyday reality. As you know, perception is that which we perceive through the five senses, and cognition is a mental interpretation of what we perceive. So perception and cognition are entangled, and they influence each other, even though they are distinct processes. Perception involves the sensory experience of the world, while cognition involves higher level mental processes like reasoning and judgment. And the two are intimately linked. Perception can influence cognition by providing the raw sensory data that cognition processes. But cognition can also shape perception by directing attention and influencing how sensory information is interpreted. So perception and cognition are entangled, but even though they are distinct entities. They are separate but interacting components of a unified awareness of the world. So one of the things that happens with perception is it's not just what's happening, it's how our attention is influencing what we experience as happening. Also, our beliefs and intentions affect early visual processing. And then there's something called grouping in causal perception. There are also cultural differences that impact the perception of causality. And there are innate modules in our sensory systems for what is called causal perception. Causal perception. So this particularly pertains to the role of attention and intention. Attention plays a significant role in influencing the perception of causality, as demonstrated by several studies. Attention can directly affect whether ambiguous events are perceived as causal. Experiments have shown that the allocation of attention can strengthen or attenuate causal perception, which means what we think is the cause of an experience. So attention displays with multiple events. Attention can select amongst competing contexts and competing context events to determine which one influences the perception of causality. Observers perceive causality differently depending on which contextual event they attend to, even when all events are equally visible or perceptible. The effect of attention on causal perception occurs at a relatively late stage of the processing, say, of visual information, and with longer stimulus onset, attention influences how shape features, how we perceive shape, is caused by our causal history, what we paid attention to in the past. Attention acts as a filter also for the input to causal perception processes. While beliefs and intentions may not directly affect causal perception, they can influence the information that reaches these processes through the voluntary allocation of attention. Then there's something very interesting called perceptual grouping, which is closely related to attention. It can also impact causal perception. Objects that are perceptually grouped together are more likely to be perceived as causally related. So all these findings suggest that attention and intention plays a crucial role in shaping our perception of causal relationships in not only the visual world, but other sensory processing too. So, in other words, there's no such thing, according to the model I'm suggesting, as a distinct objective reality. No such thing as a distinct objective reality. What we call objective reality is a species-specific intersubjective experience, the human experience. And what we humans call the physical world is actually a intersubjective experience of human perceptions. And the human perception of reality is fundamentally shaped by our species-specific sensory apparatus and cognitive processes. What we consider to be the objective physical reality is, in fact, a subjective human interpretation of sensory inputs filtered through our biological systems. Our sensory agents are tuned to detect only a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, and also narrow slice of acoustic frequency, and also a narrow slice of chemical stimuli. And even within these ranges, our perception is limited by the sensitivity thresholds of our receptors. For example, humans can only see visible light, while other animals can perceive ultraviolet or infrared radiation. So our brain, whenever I say brain, just think conditioned mind. Our brain processes and interprets, or let's say our conditioned mind, because the brain is the neural landscape of the conditioned mind, totally flexible through epigenetics and through attention, intention, and choosing what kinds of perception we have. The brain or the conditioned mind interprets these limited sensory inputs, constructing our conscious experience of the world. So our interpretation of what we think the world is heavily influenced by evolutionary history, our cultural context, and our individual experiences. What we perceive as color, sound, or smell is not an inherent property of external objects. Once again, what we perceive as color, sound, or smell is not an inherent property of what we call the external world. It's our conditioned minds or our brains, same thing, representation of certain physical stimuli. While scientific instruments allow us to detect phenomena beyond our natural sensory organs and sensory range, the data they provide is ultimately processed and understood through human cognitive frameworks. Our concepts of ultraviolet light or radio waves are human constructs used to make sense of measurements that have no direct sensory correlate in our experience. So, this species specific nature of our perception extends to our understanding of space, time, and causality. The so called universe, as we conceive it, is a human model based on our particular way of processing sensory patterns, sensory information, and abstracting patterns. Other species likely experience reality in fundamentally different ways that we may never fully comprehend. In essence, our objective reality, so called, is an intersubjective consensus among humans based on our shared sensory and cognitive apparatus. While this model has proven remarkably effective for predicting and manipulating our environment and creating technology, it remains an inherently anthropocentric view of existence. So, what we experience as the universe is the human construct, a model of a fundamental reality which essentially is incomprehensible, imperceivable, inconceivable, shapeless, formless, infinite, radically fundamental, and the cause of all experiences in all sentient beings and all the infinite range of experiences that are possible. Now, because we have AI, we have the way to access large language models, we can actually expand our range of experience. And the more we expand our range of experience, the more we actually navigate fundamental reality, which is infinite. We are infinite non-local beings having finite experiences, but even the finite experiences will now find an extended range of experience. So once again, Digital Dharma will be out in September, but in the meanwhile, you can use digitaldeepak.ai to answer queries on the posts I mentioned here as well. And again, you don't need to download an app, just go to your browser and go to digitaldeepak.ai. I'm having fun. I hope I can share this experience and you can join this amazing adventure we are all on.